He paid 50 cents for an abandoned mansion. Then his dog found what no one expected. Cal Becker had never believed in signs. Not when the IED hit 3 feet from his Humvee, not when the doctors said he'd never regain full use of his left leg, and certainly not when the auctioneer's gavel fell with a sharp crack on his 50-cent bid. Yet now, standing before the stone mansion he'd just bought for $50 and some processing fees, he found himself hesitating. Beside him, Jasper sat rigid in the passenger seat, ears forward, tail stiff. The German shepherd didn't move a muscle until Cal opened the truck door and stepped onto the gravel. The air in Wycombe County smelled of pine, damp stone, and the faint sting of January frost. The mansion, more like a fortified relic, loomed behind a curtain of tangled ivy, its gabled roof half sunk on one side. The shutters were bolted, the porch sagging under decades of silence. Cal clicked his tongue twice. "Come on, partner." Jasper jumped down, landing light despite the creak in his joints. They walked side by side up the weathered path. The key the county clerk had given him was heavy brass, scratched but cold to the touch. When he slid it into the lock, the door turned more smoothly than he expected. Almost too smoothly. That was the first unease. The second came fast. Jasper stopped at the threshold, dead still. His body stiffened, his gaze locked on the space beyond the open door. Then, without warning, a low growl began in his throat, long, controlled, and rising like tension over radio static. Cal looked down. "What is it?" he whispered. Jasper didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed inside. He gave one sharp bark, loud enough to punch through the silence of the hills. It wasn't fear, it was a warning. Cal stepped in anyway. The foyer smelled of time, old dust, dry plaster, something faintly metallic. A staircase curved to the left, leading into darkness. Light fell through fractured glass above the door, scattering across the checkered tile. The banister was clean, too clean for a house that had supposedly been abandoned since 1982. He turned to Jasper, still standing outside. The dog's paws hovered at the edge of the doorway, like he was deciding whether the floor inside could be trusted. Then slowly, Jasper stepped in, nose low, moving with the caution of a scout clearing buildings in Kandahar. They were trained for this. Cal just never thought it would matter again. Room by room, they moved. The living room was cavernous, centered by a cold stone hearth. Bookshelves lined the far wall, empty except for a warped Bible and a single broken lamp. The kitchen still held appliances in the avocado green of another era, but no dust on the handles. The fridge was unplugged. On its door, held by a magnet shaped like a trout, was a torn calendar. Cal frowned. That wasn't abandoned. That was recently abandoned. In the back hallway, Jasper froze again, ears straight up. He sniffed the floor, then backed away, pawing once at a baseboard. Cal followed the dog's gaze, but saw only faded wallpaper and wood. Jasper let out another low growl, less noise, more vibration, and pressed himself against Cal's side. "We're not alone, are we?" Cal murmured. The dog didn't blink. That night they slept in the living room. Or tried to. Cal unrolled his sleeping bag near the hearth and gave Jasper a soft command to settle in. The shepherd lay close, but didn't rest his head. His eyes scanned the room like he was still on patrol. Around midnight, the house creaked. Not the soft moan of old timber. This was weight. Shift. Pressure. Cal sat up instantly. Jasper was already standing. No bark this time, just silence and tension wound tight. The dog padded toward the hallway again, nose high, then dropped to the floor and stared at the same baseboard he had earlier. Cal grabbed his flashlight, swept it across the wall. No seams, no cracks, except there. A faint outline. A square, barely wider than a doorway, patched over in a slightly different shade of paint. He crouched, ran his fingers along the seam. Old plaster gave under his thumb. Jasper stepped forward, sniffed hard, and let out a deep, guttural bark. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. Something was inside that wall. Cal stood up slowly. "All right," he whispered. "You were right." He grabbed his pry bar from the truck and returned, Jasper glued to his side. Each pull of the metal against plaster felt louder than it should have in the hush of that house. After 20 minutes of careful work, part of the wall gave way with a dull thud. Behind it, a door. Wooden, narrow, bolted from their side. Jasper growled again, but didn't move. He waited, like he was guarding Cal more than the door. Cal stared at it, breath shallow. This wasn't a closet. This wasn't part of the blueprint the county had shown, and it certainly wasn't something the auctioneer had mentioned. He reached for the handle, then hesitated. Jasper's tail tapped once against the floor. A signal. Go. Cal pulled the door open. The air that poured out was dry, old but sharp with metal and something more, something chemical. The beam from his flashlight caught wooden steps leading downward into blackness. Jasper stepped to the edge, peered down, ears angled forward like radar. He didn't bark this time. He just waited. And Cal knew. This wasn't just a house. It was a vault, a hiding place, and they'd just cracked it open. He looked down at his partner and exhaled. "We'll do it your way from now on." Jasper wagged his tail once, then turned to the stairs and descended. The morning came without fanfare. A sliver of sunlight sliced through the broken blinds of the front room, falling across Cal Becker's face just as Jasper stood and shook the dust from his coat. The house was colder than it had any right to be, considering the weather. But it wasn't the kind of cold that came from weathered stone or poor insulation. It was the kind that came from history. Cal rubbed the sleep from his eyes and sat up slowly. His left leg always ached more in the mornings. Shrapnel damage. A lifetime ago now. He glanced at Jasper, who stared back with the quiet intensity that had unnerved enemy combatants and soothed dying soldiers in equal measure. The dog tilted his head slightly. "You slept more than I did," Cal muttered. Jasper wagged his tail once. Cal stood, rolled up the sleeping bag, and crossed to the small kitchen, where he boiled water on a camping stove. The house had electricity, but he wasn't ready to trust it yet. They'd only arrived yesterday, and already things didn't add up. The plastered-over door, the calendar from 2007, the silence. He poured hot water into 2 bowls, one over instant oatmeal, the other for Jasper's kibble. As the shepherd ate, Cal leaned against the counter and let his mind drift, just long enough to fall back into memories he thought he'd buried. He first met Jasper on a tarmac in Kandahar. The dog was all muscle and discipline then, freshly rotated from a handler lost to a roadside bomb. The unit didn't talk much about replacements, but Jasper wasn't just another warm body. He was different. He didn't bark. He observed. He didn't flinch. He leaned in. He wasn't a pet. He was a partner. And when Cal rotated stateside, medically retired and barely holding it together, Jasper had been assigned to another unit, until he wasn't. The news had come in a dry file, K9 asset scheduled for retirement. Cal had filled out the paperwork the same day. 2 months later, the shepherd was home, standing quietly at his doorstep like he'd never left. They had spent 3 years in a rental on the edge of Ash Grove, a town that was barely more than a gas station and a VFW hall. Cal fixed lawnmowers for extra cash, drank less than he used to, and tried to ignore the feeling that his life had gone still. This house, this 50-cent purchase in a forgotten corner of Wycombe County, was supposed to be the next chapter. A place where no one knew his name. Where Jasper could roam, and Cal could patch together the kind of quiet that didn't feel like defeat. but nothing about the mansion had the feel of a blank page. After breakfast, Cal pulled on his jacket and stepped outside. Jasper followed without a command. They walked the perimeter of the property, gravel crunching beneath their boots and paws. The land behind the house sloped downward toward a dry creek bed, then rose again in a fence of dense trees. Cottonwoods, old, tall, and leaning slightly east, like they were trying to escape whatever the house held. Jasper paused by the porch stairs and sniffed the ground, his head cocked, ears rigid. "You getting something?" Cal asked. Jasper lowered his nose, took a few steps, then froze. He barked once, not loud, but it was the same tone as last night. Not an alert, a warning. Cal knelt beside him, followed his gaze to a patch of soft dirt that seemed untouched. No footprints, no trash, just undisturbed earth. Then Jasper did something he hadn't done since combat. He started digging. "Easy," Cal said. But Jasper kept going, one paw, then the other. Slow, methodical, not frantic. What he uncovered wasn't dramatic, just a strip of faded canvas, partially buried. Cal pulled it out gently. It was a duffel bag strap, no bag attached, just the strap, frayed at the end like it had been torn loose. He glanced back toward the house. "You think someone left in a hurry?" Jasper didn't answer, of course. But the dog stood perfectly still, his gaze not on the house, but on the ridge of trees beyond it. Cal followed his line of sight. Movement, just a flicker. Gone in a second. Squirrel? Deer? Or something that watched and didn't want to be seen? He didn't like guessing. They circled back to the house. As they reached the back steps, Cal stopped short. The kitchen window, which had been stuck halfway open last night, he remembered trying to close it, was now shut tight, locked from the inside. His jaw tensed. He opened the back door. Jasper pushed past him immediately, nose in the air. The house felt altered. Subtle things. A draft where there wasn't one before. The refrigerator humming when he swore it had been dead. A faint scent he couldn't place. Not smoke, not mildew, human. Cal reached into the utility bag near the door and pulled out his sidearm. Not out of panic, out of practice. Jasper stayed low, tail straight, body coiled. They moved room to room. Nothing out of place, not obviously. But when Cal stepped into the hallway where the hidden door had been, he stopped cold. The plaster debris he'd left scattered on the floor from last night's work. Gone, swept, clean. No footprints, no dust, just a blank floor. He looked at Jasper. "You saw me leave it there, right?" Jasper padded forward, sniffed the floor, then looked up. The kind of look that said, "I don't need you to believe me, but you need to." Cal exhaled slowly. The tension climbed his spine in slow inches. He thought of what he'd said to himself years ago, when he chose to adopt Jasper instead of let the government retire him into a kennel or worse. He never barked at shadows. So what was this? Back in the kitchen, Cal poured a second cup of coffee and sat at the table, Jasper at his feet. The dog rested his head on Cal's boot. Not asleep, not even tired. Just there. Present, like always. Outside, the sky was overcast, the clouds heavy enough to press down on the hills. Wind moved through the trees like a whisper through locked doors. Cal took a sip, eyes locked on the hallway where the plaster had once been. This wasn't a house anymore. It was a message. And someone had just replied. It started with a sound Jasper never made unless something was wrong. A single, low growl. Then silence. Cal had just set down a wrench in the utility room, half focused on fixing a leaking pipe near the washer hookup. He froze. Jasper stood 3 feet away, nose pressed to the base of the wall, his body frozen in that particular stillness that came from training. Not instinct. His tail didn't twitch, his eyes didn't blink. Only his ears, angled like twin radars, adjusted to something Cal couldn't hear. "What is it, Bud?" Cal asked softly. Jasper responded by pawing the wall. Once, then twice. Each scrape precise, no wasted motion. There was nothing there, just decades-old paint, cracked molding, and faint water stains. But the dog didn't move. Cal crouched beside him and ran his palm across the surface. Cold. Then he felt it, a thin vertical seam, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. His fingers followed it down. Halfway through, the texture shifted. Paint on top of drywall. But then, oddly, a ridge. Beneath the paint was something patched in. Sloppy work. The color didn't quite match. The surface was slightly concave. Cal tapped it with his knuckle. Hollow. Someone covered something. Jasper let out a short huff through his nose and backed up. Not fearful, making room. Cal stood and grabbed the pry bar from the hallway closet. Jasper sat behind him like a statue as Cal wedged the flat end into the edge of the seam and pried. The wall gave reluctantly. First a crack, then a groan, then a soft crumble of plaster onto the floor. The outline of a door appeared. Not a closet door. Narrow, tall, sealed at one point with cement and mesh lath, now brittle with age. Cal's breath slowed. This wasn't on any floor plan. The clerk at the annex hadn't said anything about a basement, and this door wasn't where a basement should be anyway. He worked quickly, years of mechanical training kicking in. The barrier came apart in chunks. Jasper didn't move a muscle. Finally, the door groaned open. Darkness spilled out, not black, but thick. Cal clicked on his flashlight and stepped forward. The air smelled wrong. Not rotted, preserved, dust, iron, and old paper. Wooden stairs descended into shadow. Jasper went first. Of course he did. The steps creaked beneath the shepherd's weight, but the dog moved carefully, testing each tread. Cal followed, flashlight slicing through stale air. At the bottom, the beam illuminated rows of metal filing cabinets, cardboard boxes stacked neatly beside them. The walls were stone, old and cool to the touch, but solid. This wasn't a storage cellar, it was a vault. Jasper sniffed along the floor, then sat near a long desk at the center of the room. His gaze fixed on the far wall where a stack of boxes leaned awkwardly. Cal moved toward them and brushed off a layer of dust. Each box was labeled in tidy old handwriting. Land transfer records, Wycombe County, 1976 to 1988. He pulled one open. Inside, manila folders with seals from the county recorder's office. Most looked standard, but a few, Cal frowned, had 2 sets of signatures. The names looked familiar. Properties from neighboring counties, crossed out, reassigned. Cal flipped to a folder marked Petition, Bone Trust, Unsettled. That's when he saw the photo. His hand paused. It was his father. Younger, maybe late 30s, standing beside a German shepherd in uniform harness. The dog's ears were pinned back slightly, as if it had just finished working. His father wore a civilian blazer, but his posture was military. Back straight, chin tight. Cal turned the photo over, written in faint pencil. Meeting, 1979. Land rights case, witness refused to recant. He didn't speak. Couldn't. His father, Richard Becker, had died when Cal was 17. A sudden heart attack? No red flags. Cal had grown up believing his dad was just another paper pusher at the county records office. Steady, quiet, boring. But now, holding this photo, feeling the fine dust cling to the back of his hand, Cal knew that wasn't the whole story. He moved to the desk, pulled open drawers. More records, affidavits, letters. One was addressed but never mailed. To be opened by next of kin. His name was on the envelope. Cal unfolded the letter. The handwriting was sharp but rushed. If I cannot speak in court, let my son know the truth. The land was stolen. I have proof. If anything happens to me, it wasn't natural. Don't let them erase this." He read it twice, then a third time. Jasper shifted beside him and pressed his head into Cal's thigh. Not hard, not nudging for attention. Just there. The way he'd been on nights after a friend didn't make it back. Or when Cal woke up from the kind of dreams he didn't talk about. "You knew," Cal whispered. "Somehow you knew." Jasper blinked slowly. Cal set the letter down and opened another drawer. Maps, stamped and marked, property lines redrawn in pencil. A note. Holt approved this, illegally, scribbled in the margins. The name Holt appeared more than once. Mayor Nathan Holt. Cal leaned back in the chair. The basement was silent, but the weight of it pressed in from all sides. The documents, the handwriting, the map with his father's notes. This house, this stupid half-dollar gamble, was more than just stone and old wood. It was a graveyard for the truth. Jasper stood suddenly, not alert, defensive. The dog moved toward the stairs, ears sharp, shoulders tense. He turned, looked at Cal. The message was clear. We're not alone. Cal clicked off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed them whole, but Jasper didn't flinch. He took a step forward and waited. Like always. Cal didn't sleep the rest of the night. The weight of the letter, the photograph, and the vault full of buried truth hung around his chest like body armor that no longer protected, just crushed. By dawn, he had sorted the most important documents into a heavy canvas folder. The rest he resealed inside the basement vault, reinforced the false wall with temporary wood panels, and marked nothing on the outside. Jasper paced every step of the preparation. He didn't rest either. When Cal locked the house and stepped out into the freezing morning, the shepherd jumped into the passenger seat without being told. His tail wasn't wagging. His nose was already to the wind, scanning, watching. Downtown Wycombe was still sleepy when they arrived. Shops hadn't opened yet, but the county annex was lit. Cal pulled into the same spot where he had first parked weeks ago, when he was just a man chasing peace with a dog and a 50-cent deed. The same woman who had handed him the key sat behind the glass at reception. Her nameplate read, Martin. She looked up from her computer and froze for just a second. Cal held up the folder. "I need to speak with someone in records, or the county clerk." She smiled, tight-lipped. "Do you have an appointment?" He blinked. Didn't need one last time. She hesitated, then stood. Just a moment. Cal watched her disappear into the hallway. Jasper sat beside him, his body blocking the door, posture stiff. A minute passed, then another. Martin returned, her smile now replaced by something else. Wariness. "I'm sorry, Mr. Becker. We can't accept outside materials for submission, especially not without clearance from legal." Cal frowned. "I'm not submitting anything. I want someone to review it. There are forged property records. Fraud." "I understand," she said quietly. "But I'm not allowed to accept it. You'll have to contact the county attorney's office." "I thought this was the county attorney's building." She glanced to the side. "Not for this." Something in her tone was off, memorized, too practiced. She wasn't just turning him away, she was afraid. Cal opened the folder just enough to flash the photo of his father beside the service dog. Her eyes caught on it for half a second. Recognition flickering. Then she looked away. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice barely audible. "If you leave it here, it'll be discarded." Jasper let out a low growl, not loud, but it vibrated through the tiled floor. Cal closed the folder. "Fine." He left. On the street, the cold hit harder. Not because the air had changed, but because something inside had. Jasper stuck close to his side, scanning the sidewalks. Cal looked across the road and spotted a diner, the same one he had eaten at when he first came to town. He hadn't thought much of it then. He just remembered the bacon smell that lingered and the waitress who smiled when she saw Jasper. Now the windows looked darker. Inside, a few patrons sipped coffee. He crossed the street and pushed open the door. The bell chimed overhead. The conversation inside stopped. Jasper stepped in behind him. The man behind the counter, tall, broad shoulders, apron crusted with grease, looked up and shook his head. "No dogs. He's trained," Cal said, keeping his tone calm. "Military, canine. He won't cause any problems. No dogs," the man repeated. He didn't raise his voice, but his hand dropped to the broom, leaned near the counter. The bristles tapped once against the floor. Jasper stiffened instantly. "Look," Cal said, stepping in front of Jasper. "I just want a coffee and a seat." "We're not serving today," the man said, staring at the folder in Cal's hand. "The sign says open." Then the sign's wrong. Behind him, the waitress who had smiled last time was wiping a perfectly clean table. She didn't look up. The couple in the booth near the window dropped their eyes to their plates. The message was clear. Leave. Cal turned, opened the door, and walked out. Jasper followed, his head low, eyes flicking behind them, as if still waiting for the real threat. On the sidewalk, a woman pulled her young son close when Jasper passed. The boy reached out to touch the dog. She yanked his hand back. "Don't touch that. That not him." Cal's jaw clenched. They walked the length of Main Street. The bookstore had its shades drawn. The pharmacy clerk behind the window turned away when Cal made eye contact. It wasn't just disinterest. It was evasion. Every look, every closed blind, every pulled hand carried the same truth. They knew. Maybe not the full story, but enough to want it buried. At home, an envelope sat in the mailbox. Official-looking. No stamp. Just a typed return address. Wycombe Community Bank. Cal opened it on the porch. Inside, a letter outlined a newly assessed fee for administrative restructuring. The cost? Nearly $2,000. Due in 30 days. Failure to pay would trigger repossession of the property. He laughed. Short, hollow. Jasper sniffed the envelope, then let out a short breath through his nose and sat beside Cal. His eyes weren't on the letter. They were on the tree line again. Watching. They were trying to push him out. He looked at his partner. "They're not even pretending." Jasper tilted his head. Not confused. Just waiting. Waiting to see if his human would flinch. Cal folded the letter slowly, then tore it down the center and dropped it into the trash can by the porch. "We're not running," he said quietly. Jasper didn't move. Didn't need to. Inside, Cal locked the door, bolted the back windows, and sat at the kitchen table. He opened the folder again. Not to read. To remind himself that every page had a price. And someone in Wycombe had decided it would be cheaper if he left. He looked across the room at Jasper, who had returned to the hallway and now sat facing the wall. The same wall, the one they had opened, the one they had exposed. Jasper stared like he expected it to answer, or like it already had. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as Cal's truck pulled off the county road and onto a long, weed-choked driveway. Jasper stood in the passenger seat, ears scanning, nose twitching slightly. The old ranch house at the end of the lane looked like it had stopped caring what year it was. Paint peeled from the siding, rust curled along the edges of forgotten farm tools scattered across the porch, and a satellite dish hung askew from the roof. Cal parked beside a rusted-out tractor, grabbed the thick folder off the dashboard, and stepped out. Jasper didn't wait for a command. He was already out and circling the perimeter, nose low to the dirt. On the porch sat a man in a flannel shirt, coffee mug in one hand, and a long scar tracing the side of his weathered face. His grey hair was combed neatly, his boots mud-caked, but clean where it mattered. His eyes followed Jasper first. "That him?" the man called out. "That's Jasper," Cal replied. "He doesn't bite, unless you lie." The man's mouth twitched with the ghost of a grin. "Then I'll try to keep it honest." Cal stepped up onto the porch and extended a hand. "Tom Redfield?" "You must be Richard Becker's boy." Cal nodded. "Cal." Tom set the mug down and shook his hand. His grip was solid, but not performative. There was fatigue in it. Not physical, something older. "Come inside," he said. "It's warmer than it looks." The living room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Framed photos lined the walls. Tom in uniform beside various state officials, shaking hands, standing behind podiums, a younger version of himself with Cal's father. Jasper entered last. He didn't wander. He planted himself beside Cal's chair like a shadow with lungs. Tom poured coffee, no questions asked. Cal laid the folder on the table. "I think my father was into something," he said, "and I think it got him killed." Tom didn't answer right away. He sat slowly, reached for the folder, and opened it. He stared at the first photo, the one of Richard with the shepherd, standing in front of the courthouse steps. Tom let out a breath. "That's Rex." "You knew him?" "I did more than know him," Tom said. "I trusted that dog with more than my life." He stood, moved to a sideboard drawer, and returned with a small tin box. Inside was a cracked leather collar. A tag still hung from it, worn thin but still readable. Rex. Tom placed it on the table between them. Jasper sniffed it once and froze. Then he sat, posture erect, eyes locked on the collar like it held the past in its seams. Tom saw it too. "I'll never forget that night," he said quietly. "Your dad and I were working on something. Big. Land transfers that didn't make sense. Names signed twice. Parcels sold twice. All of it pointed to someone pulling strings. Nathan Holt was just a city councilman back then. Charismatic. Smiled a lot." Tom paused. His fingers curled slowly against the edge of the collar. "One night we got a tip about a box of files in a maintenance shed behind the courthouse. Your father went to check it out. I stayed back with Rex. The call came 30 minutes later. Car crash. Off the road. No skid marks." Cal didn't speak. "We got there too late," Tom said. "Your father was barely conscious. Rex was gone. Vanished. Took 3 days to find the body. They'd dumped him like garbage near the quarry." Tom cleared his throat, but his voice cracked anyway. "They killed that dog to send a message, and they made sure we got it." Jasper let out a low whine, barely audible, and touched the collar gently with his nose. Tom watched, and his voice softened. "They remember, you know. Dogs. It's not just scent. It's memory." Cal picked up the collar. The leather was stiff but not brittle. His fingers traced the indent where the buckle had once rubbed against Rex's fur. "I thought my dad just worked with deeds and zoning maps," he said. "He did," Tom replied. "But he was one of the few who gave a damn what those maps meant to people." Cal looked up. "Why didn't you finish what you started?" Tom's jaw tensed. He leaned back, eyes drifting toward the window. "I had a wife back then. A son. One night after Rex died, I came home and found a picture of my family duct-taped to my front door. No note, just the photo. I understood what that meant." He took a sip of coffee, hand steady now. "I boxed up what I had and buried it at the bottom of a drawer. Every day since, I've hated myself for it." Jasper's head turned. Outside, something creaked. Not close. Just enough for the dog's attention to shift. He didn't bark, but he didn't relax either. Tom didn't miss it. "They watch," he said. "Still, not just you. Me too, it doesn't go away." Cal opened another folder, pulled out a map marked with his father's handwriting. We can expose it. All of it. I just need someone to back me. Tom stared at the map. Then at Jasper. Your dog. He's from the same program. Same base. Cal said. Different war. Tom nodded slowly. Then maybe this time we finish what was started. He reached down and slid the collar across the table toward Jasper. Give him this, Tom said. Let him carry it. Jasper stood, took the collar in his mouth, and walked to the door. He didn't look back. He just waited. Cal followed, the fire in his chest no longer just about justice or revenge. It was about finishing a sentence his father never got to complete. And Jasper, carrying Rex's collar like a vow, wasn't just walking beside him anymore. He was leading. The house had been quiet for 3 days. Almost too quiet. Cal patched the window in the hallway, replaced 2 floorboards near the back steps. He even managed to fix the porch light, which flickered now and then like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay lit. For a while, the stillness felt like a truce. The town had gone silent again. No more bank letters, no sideways stares when he walked Main Street. But he didn't mistake it for peace. Neither did Jasper. The shepherd stayed close, even indoors. He lingered near the back door at night, ears pricked, posture tense, alert to sounds Cal couldn't hear. Sometimes the dog would stare out the window, not moving, eyes locked on the tree line for long stretches, as if waiting for something that never came. Until it did. It started small, barely noticeable. A faint sharpness in the air, the kind that makes the hairs rise on the back of your neck before you can name the cause. Cal was in the living room, sorting through more records from the hidden basement. Jasper was near the kitchen. It was almost midnight. The air was still. Then Jasper stiffened. He didn't bark. Not at first. He rose slowly, nose lifted, tail rigid, his body moving with the deliberate caution of a bomb dog on patrol. He padded silently across the tile and stopped by the stove. He sniffed once, backed up a step, then looked toward Cal. Then he barked. One sharp, commanding sound that ricocheted off the walls. Cal dropped the folder and stood. "What is it?" Jasper barked again. Louder this time. His head turned back to the stove. Cal crossed the room, and the smell hit him hard. Gas. He lunged for the shut-off valve beneath the stove and turned it with shaking hands. His chest tightened, breath catching as the weight of it settled in. That burner wasn't on earlier. He'd made coffee just 2 hours ago. He always checked it. Always. Jasper circled once behind him, then ran to the back door, barking sharply. Cal threw open the kitchen windows. The bitter winter air rushed in. He opened the door wide and stepped out, sucking down fresh air. His hands were still shaking. Someone had been in the house, not to steal, not to warn, to kill. Jasper barked again and took off toward the far corner of the yard. Cal grabbed the flashlight and followed. The cold bit through his shirt, but he didn't feel it. All he felt was heat rising under his skin. By the time he reached the fence line, Jasper was sniffing along the ground. The beam of light caught the thin layer of frost near the edge of the trees. And something else. Boot prints. Fresh. Deep. Leading from the woods to the rear of the house. And then away. Jasper followed the scent along the fence, tail straight, nose close to the ground. He stopped, turned his head toward the darkness, and growled low in his chest. Cal scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. No wind. No sound. But they both knew someone had been there. He knelt beside Jasper and whispered, "You saved our lives." The dog didn't move, didn't blink. He just kept his eyes on the trees, like he expected them to breathe. Back inside, Cal sealed the shutoff with electrical tape. He checked every lock twice, then 3 times. Jasper paced the house like a soldier doing rounds. By 2 a.m., Cal sat in the living room, with the rifle across his lap, flashlight within arm's reach. Jasper curled beside him but never truly settled. His ears flicked at every creak of the floorboards, every moan of the old house. Settling. Cal didn't try to sleep. He thought of Rex, of the photo of his father standing beside that dog on courthouse steps, of the collar Jasper now carried like a torch handed down from one partner to the next. And he thought of the gas. The burner left on, the quiet scent that might have killed them if Jasper hadn't caught it. They weren't being watched anymore. They were being hunted. He reached down and rested his hand on Jasper's back. The shepherd's body was warm, breathing steady. But under his skin was tension, coiled muscle, still ready, still listening. "They're testing us," Cal said softly, "seeing how close they can get before we notice." Jasper didn't look up, just blinked slowly, a quiet agreement. This wasn't a warning. It was a move. And whatever game they were playing, it had just escalated. The truce was over. It took Cal 2 days to decide on Hannah Grace. She wasn't just any reporter. She had written the story that followed Cal's old unit after they returned home, refusing to reduce them to sound bites and stats. Her coverage had been blunt, compassionate, and deeply human. She had earned respect, not just with what she printed, but what she chose not to. She knew when to tell a story and when to protect the people inside it. So Cal sent her a message through a secure line he still remembered from a contact at the base. Kept it short. No details. Just a question. Would you listen? Her reply came 6 hours later. When and where? He chose neutral ground. A truck stop an hour west of Wycombe. 1 road in, 1 road out. He didn't want her stepping too close to the house until he knew which direction the fire would come from. Jasper rode shotgun, ears twitching, eyes constantly shifting to the mirrors. He had been more restless than usual. Every noise, every turn of gravel put him on edge. Cal trusted that feeling more than he trusted his own instincts now. The truck stop was nearly empty. A few semis lined the far lot. The air smelled of diesel, stale coffee, and wet concrete. Cal pulled into a side space beneath a flickering sodium light. Jasper stood the moment the engine stopped, front paws on the edge of the door. Hannah arrived 20 minutes later in a silver Subaru. She parked beside him, but stayed in the vehicle until Cal stepped out and waved. She emerged, small frame wrapped in a navy jacket, hair pulled into a knot, and a camera bag slung over one shoulder. Jasper watched her without sound, his gaze sharp. "He's bigger in person," she said, nodding toward the dog. "And a hell of a lot smarter than most people I know." Jasper sniffed her once, then sat, accepting but watchful. They walked to a small booth in the diner attached to the truck stop. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A waitress poured coffee but didn't ask for names. Cal laid out the copies, photos, handwritten letters, maps. Hannah read in silence. Her jaw clenched at some pages. Others made her stop and reread, eyes narrowing. After a while she looked up. "If even a quarter of this is real, it's all real," Cal said. She nodded once, then looked out the window. "You've already been followed, haven't you?" "Noticed some things. Enough to know it's not paranoia." Hannah tapped the edge of the photo of his father with Rex. "And the town? Turned its back before I even got started." She leaned forward. "Then we're going to make noise they can't ignore." Outside, Jasper barked once, not loud, but urgent. Cal was already moving. He opened the diner door and scanned the lot. Jasper stood near the back of the truck, his body frozen, ears locked forward. A car idled near the edge of the lot. Black. Windows tinted. Engine too quiet. Cal's heart kicked once, then steadied. Hannah stepped beside him, her voice low. "That car wasn't there 10 minutes ago." Jasper moved, slow and deliberate, placing himself between the vehicle and the humans behind him. The sedan didn't move, didn't flash lights, just sat there, silent and watching. Cal took 2 steps forward, body angled, one hand resting near his hip, not on a weapon, but close enough. Jasper barked again, deep, commanding. The car's engine revved once, then it rolled forward, cutting across the lot, not toward the exit, but slowly past Cal's truck, almost brushing the bumper. The window lowered 2 inches. No face, just a voice. "You should go home, Mr. Becker." Then it drove off. Hannah exhaled, slow and shaking. That was a message. Cal looked at Jasper. The shepherd's body didn't relax until the taillights vanished behind the hill. "That was a test," Cal said. "They wanted to see if we'd blink." Hannah's voice was harder now. "And we didn't." They didn't go back to the diner. Instead, Cal walked Hannah to her car. Jasper followed every step, ears twitching, nose raised to the wind. Hannah opened the passenger door and reached for her bag. Before she could grab it, Jasper stepped forward and barked sharply. She froze. "What?" Cal joined them. Jasper pressed his nose to the door seam, sniffed, then let out a low growl. His tail was stiff. He backed up. Cal opened the door carefully, crouched, and scanned the floorboard. A small black device was taped beneath the seat. "No signal light," Hannah whispered. "That's not GPS." "It's audio," Cal said. "Listening device." He peeled it off and crushed it under his boot. Jasper sat, eyes fixed on Hannah's car, as if daring it to contain more surprises. "You brought them with you," Cal said gently. Hannah shook her head. "I swept my car before I left." "They didn't plant it at your house. They planted it here." Realization hit both of them at once. "They were already at the truck stop," she said. Cal nodded, "which means they knew we'd come." Jasper stepped closer to Hannah, nose lifted, then slowly touched her hand. Not for comfort, for confirmation. She wasn't the enemy. Hannah's voice dropped. "This story, it's bigger than I thought." Cal didn't answer. He just looked at Jasper. The dog stood tall, chest out, head high, not because of instinct. Because he had seen this before. In different countries, under different flags. The tools were the same. Pressure, fear, isolation. But the eyes were always watching, just out of reach. "We can't meet here again," Hannah said. "No," Cal replied. "Next time you come to the house, it's already marked." Jasper's gaze flicked to him. No resistance, only quiet readiness. He was more than a dog. He was the one thing in Cal's life that had never lied, never wavered, never turned away when the lights dimmed and the air grew thin. That night, driving back, Cal glanced at his partner beside him. "You felt them before I saw them," he said. Jasper didn't move, but his tail swept once against the seat. Not pride, acknowledgement. Cal stared at the road, heart still thrumming. Not from fear, from knowing he wasn't alone. He never had been. It was supposed to be a routine check-in. Tom Redfield was scheduled to meet Cal and Hannah that afternoon at a neutral spot just outside the county line. A picnic turnout overlooking the creek bend, a place Tom trusted. He had copies of testimonies from former landowners, and the last folder Cal hadn't dared keep at the house, the one with his father's original annotations. But Tom never showed. No call, no message, just absence. Cal tried his number, straight to voicemail. Hannah paced beside the truck, nerves rattling harder than she let on. He wouldn't just disappear. No, Cal said. He wouldn't. That's when Jasper stood up in the truck bed, body rigid. His ears twitched, nose lifted. Then he barked once, sharp, and jumped to the ground. Cal opened the passenger door, already grabbing his flashlight and sidearm. Jasper trotted to the edge of the tree line, sniffed the air again, then turned back, waiting. He had a scent. "Take us," Cal said. Jasper moved like a soldier. Cal followed. They crossed the creek bed, slipped into thick woods, pushed past thickets where no paths had been cleared in years. Jasper didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose, pausing only to re-center the trail. The sun was gone behind clouds. The air tasted like rust and pine bark. 10 minutes in, Jasper stopped. His nose brushed the ground. Then he looked up at Cal. Blood. Not much, but enough. It was smeared against the root of an oak. Fresh. A trail curved from it, a staggered pattern of boot prints leading north. Jasper followed. Another 100 yards, and the trees thinned. Ahead, half sunken in brush and shadow, stood an old storage barn. Metal siding. No windows. The kind of place built for hiding tractors. Or people? Cal crouched behind a stump, pulled out binoculars. One vehicle parked beside it. Black. Government issue. Unmarked. Jasper lay beside him, breathing slow, body still. They waited. 1 minute, then 2. No guards outside, no movement. Cal whispered, "We go silent. You stay close." Inside, the barn smelled like old oil and damp concrete. There were footsteps echoing from deeper in the structure, a voice, low, male, too far to make out words. Then another sound, a groan. "Tom." Cal followed it, Jasper pressed to his heel. In a corner, half shadowed by rusted shelves, Tom sat slumped in a chair. His face was bruised. One arm zip-tied to the frame, the other hanging limp. Blood crusted along his temple. Across the room, a man stood flipping through the last folder. Cal recognized him from old campaign photos. Nathan Holt, older now, but still with that same clean-pressed authority. His coat was off, sleeves rolled up, but he held himself like someone who hadn't been touched in years. "You're late," Holt said, not looking up. Cal stepped fully into the room, gun drawn. "Let him go." Holt didn't flinch. "You won't shoot. You're too much your father's son." He closed the folder, held it loosely. "I want to make a deal. You walk out with him. I walk out with this. Fair?" Behind Cal. Jasper growled. Holt raised an eyebrow. "You brought the dog. He's smarter than most people I know." Then maybe he should make the call. Cal's pulse pounded in his neck. He could shoot. Holt wasn't armed, but there were other men. He knew it. He could feel the tension in Jasper's body. They weren't alone. He stepped toward Tom, kept his gun trained. "That file doesn't leave this room." Holt gave a tight smile. "Then neither do you." A floorboard behind Cal creaked. He turned sharply. No one there. Jasper barked once, then bolted left, toward the back of the barn, nose down. "What is he—" Then Cal heard it. A hollow echo beneath Jasper's paws. The shepherd scratched once at the ground, then began digging frantically, his claws pulling up boards covered in hay. A trapdoor. Cal looked back. Holt's men stepped from the shadows, 2 of them, armed but not aiming yet. "I said leave it," Holt warned. Cal lunged for Tom, cut the zip tie with his blade, hauled him to his feet. Tom groaned but stood with help. Jasper barked again, louder now. He'd pried the trapdoor halfway open. Cal didn't wait. He dragged Tom across the floor, fired once toward the ceiling to buy seconds, then dropped through the open hatch, Tom crashing down beside him. Jasper leapt in last, teeth bared, ears pinned. Gunfire exploded above them. They scrambled through the dark tunnel, narrow, musty, lined with gravel and damp boards. It felt like a smuggler's path. Jasper led, navigating every turn without hesitation. Behind them, voices shouted, but no one followed. The exit dumped them into a dry ravine behind the barn, covered in brush. Cal pulled Tom out, dragging him up the slope towards the truck. They didn't stop until they reached it. Jasper jumped into the truck bed and turned, growling until Cal threw the vehicle into reverse. Only when they were back on the road did the tension begin to drain. Tom groaned beside him, his face pale but conscious. "The file," he said weakly. Cal shook his head. "They took it." Jasper sat quietly, nose to the wind. The folder was gone, but they were alive, and Holt had just shown his hand. Cal gripped the wheel harder. "We'll rebuild it," he said. Jasper's ears flicked once. Agreement, then silence. Only the sound of tires on gravel and the wind outside. No longer a warning, but a call to war. By the time dawn painted the sky a muted grey, Jasper was already at the gate, tail stiff, ears pivoting like twin satellites. The mountain was quiet, too quiet. No bird song, no rustling wind, just the kind of silence that feels full of watching eyes. Cal hadn't slept. None of them had. Inside the cabin, Hannah sat hunched over her laptop, her fingers dancing across the keys. The flickering light of her screen lit her face in sharp angles, focused, pale, angry. "The files are gone," she said without looking up. "But I backed up the metadata. It's not everything, but it's enough to blow the first hole." "You sure?" Cal asked, still holding the scabbed overcut on his temple from the warehouse. She glanced up. "I'm sure enough to call the feds." Outside, Jasper let out a low, almost imperceptible growl. Cal went to the porch, barefoot on cold wood, and saw what the dog had already sensed. The mayor's car was gone. Not parked crooked by the post office like usual. Not parked in front of the diner for his morning bribe of coffee and sausage. Just gone. And then it began. At first it was a whisper, a pair of unmarked black SUVs pulling into town around noon when most people were too busy to notice. Then came the tape. The yellow, fluttering kind that says something bad happened here, but we won't tell you what. Hannah stood beside one of the agents as they moved into the town hall. "You're going to want the basement," she said. "That's where they kept the original land deeds, and a locked room labeled Utilities. That room doesn't go to Utilities." The agent gave her a look. He didn't ask how she knew, but it didn't stop there. Something cracked open in the town. It wasn't just an investigation anymore, it was a reckoning. Elderly couples who hadn't spoken in years knocked on Cal's door with bundles wrapped in oilcloth. Wills, letters, old photographs, even a reel of Super 8 film labeled Devlin Creek Expansion, 92. Each document carried the weight of something unsaid for too long. Cal cleared out the old study and turned it into what people started calling the evidence room. Jasper took to lying by the door, watching each person who came in, his eyes scanning them with the kind of scrutiny no machine could replicate. He didn't bark. He didn't have to. They came like pilgrims, not just townsfolk now, but reporters, lawyers, a woman in military blues who said her father used to own the land where the sinkhole opened up last year. They brought stories, receipts. One man showed up with a hand-drawn map of underground tanks hidden decades ago and long since forgotten. Cal pinned it to the wall, next to a photograph of a group of men in hard hats shaking hands with the missing mayor. The silence that had gripped the town for years, it cracked, not in a scream, but in the slow, relentless unraveling of fear. Some pushed back. The assistant district attorney tried to call the operation unlawful. His house was searched the next day. In the basement, they found shredded invoices from one of the dummy contractors listed in Hannah's files. By the third day, Cal's cabin felt more like a command post than a home. Jasper moved between rooms like a ghost, always stopping in doorways before entering, scanning, listening. "Is he trained to do that?" someone asked. "No," Cal said. "He just knows." One night, after everyone had gone, Cal sat on the porch, watching the fog roll down the slope. He sipped from a mug gone cold and looked at Jasper, who hadn't moved from the porch edge. You ever feel like this isn't over?" Jasper didn't answer, but his ears twitched. Somewhere down the road, an engine idled for too long, then cut. The silence returned, not the oppressive kind, but the kind that says something is still coming. And Jasper, without moving, stayed alert, still watching, still guarding. The morning was cool, crisp in the way only October mornings could be. Leaves rustled gently across the gravel drive as the sun filtered through gold and amber treetops. The world felt quieter now, slower, not because justice had come completely, but because the silence had meaning again. Cal sat on the edge of the porch, one leg propped, coffee cooling in his hand. Beside him, Jasper rested his head against Cal's boot. Older now, silver touching the muzzle, eyes a bit cloudier, but still impossibly alert. His ears twitched every few seconds, catching distant sounds Cal would never notice. He hadn't barked in weeks, but Cal never worried. If Jasper needed to speak, the world would listen. The cabin had changed since spring. What used to be a quiet retreat was now a living monument. Inside, what once were dusty rooms filled with tools and old memories had become a sprawling evidence room. Locals had come with manila folders, faded photographs, letters stuffed in shoeboxes, all linking back to the hidden contracts, the false death certificates, the missing funds. Hannah organized everything with eerie precision, her voice calm even when the weight of it all seemed impossible to carry. Tom had recovered. He spent most afternoons cataloguing files on an old laptop, pausing occasionally to scratch behind Jasper's ears or toss him a piece of jerky. The boy smiled more now, but he walked differently, quieter, more cautious. Trauma had aged him, but Jasper hadn't left his side since they escaped the warehouse. That kind of loyalty didn't ask for explanations. It just stayed. No one had seen the mayor since the raid. Rumors circled like hawks. Some said he'd crossed the border. Others whispered he was still in town, hiding in plain sight. Hannah believed he wouldn't run, not because he had courage, but because he was arrogant enough to think no one would touch him. But they would, and this time they had the town behind them. The front gate creaked. Jasper rose, slow but certain, tail still and low. Cal followed his gaze. A teenage girl with a frayed backpack stood beyond the gate, notebook in hand, eyes wide behind black-rimmed glasses. She smiled nervously. "Sir, my name's Lila Barnes. I'm from the high school in town. I'm writing a report on local heroes. My teacher told me you were, well, that you and your dog helped uncover something that changed everything." Cal didn't speak for a long time. Jasper moved first, padding slowly down the steps until he stood beside the girl, sniffed her shoes, and sat. She giggled, startled by the gentle acceptance. Cal nodded toward the gate. "You want to know the story?" She opened her notebook quickly, ready to scribble. "It's all there," Cal said, pointing behind him to the porch wall. There, carved into a plank of rough-cut cedar, was a line barely weathered by time. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. Lila stared at it, lips parted, eyes blinking faster. She looked at Cal, then at Jasper, who had resumed his post beside the door, front legs crossed, gaze fixed on the road. Did he know?" she whispered. "All along?" Cal didn't answer directly. He took a slow sip from the chipped mug in his hand and watched as a blue jay fluttered from one branch to another. "Sometimes," he said at last, "the ones who can't speak the way we do, they see what we won't. And when they do speak, we damn well better listen." Jasper looked up at him just then, and for the first time in days he gave a single, soft bark. Lila jumped slightly. Then she smiled. "Is he still guarding?" Cal nodded. "Always." Lila scribbled that down like it meant everything. Maybe it did. She stayed for a while, asking quiet questions. She asked if it was scary, if Cal ever regretted coming back to the cabin. He only answered one. When people told you to leave this place, why did you stay? He looked down at Jasper, then out toward the forest, golden in the late morning sun. Because someone needed to stay. That afternoon, as the girl disappeared down the trail, Jasper stood for a while at the edge of the property, watching. Not barking, just watching. Because even now, after the trials, the interrogations, the headlines and arrests, some truths still hadn't come to light. But Jasper was still here, still watching, still guarding. So, what's your story with a loyal pet? If you've ever had a dog that didn't just wag his tail but watched over your soul, let us know in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, truth, and four-legged heroes. This is the German Shepherd Project, where loyalty always finds a voice.